After we had crossed the Little Bighorn, up above the Indian village, Major Reno gave the order, straight ahead and into line, put guns in load, sprint. And at that, the men whooped like Indians and yelled, "Hi-ya!" as we surged down the valley. "Hello, ya! That's correct, lads," Reno yelled. We kept riding fast till we were almost at the Indian camp. By then, we were surrounded by Indians, the bluffs to our left swarming with them. The next command came: "Get down and engage in foot combat." We moved immediately to establish a 5-foot distant skirmish line. The Indians were firing at us from every direction. We then moved into a clump of timber. Being the tallest man in the troop, they called me Big Fritz. I was number 1 in the line. We dismounted in the forest, and I gave my horse to number 4, who took it and held it and the horses of the other 2. There was intense fighting going on, and guys were falling out quickly. The Indians seemed to be all about us, but we were unable to identify them. They were constantly giving each other signals with their little bone whistles. Major Reno grew concerned about the horses and ordered a retreat, but Captain French overruled him, ordering him to retreat facing the enemy. I was unable to locate my horse or the man who was keeping it when the order to return to the river was given. So, along with around 12 or 14 others, I stayed put in the woods. Lieutenant DeRudio was with us and took charge of the situation. We were still under heavy fire, with shots and shouts echoing as our comrades retreated to the river and up the bluffs. We did our best to stay hidden in the timber, avoiding the Indians' sight, though they continued to fire and whistle all around us. After what felt like a long time, things quieted down a bit. Lieutenant DeRudio decided we needed to make our way up to the bluffs to join the rest of the command, so we carefully moved toward the river. The water looked rather deep, and since I was the tallest man in the group, I was ordered to cross first and lead the way. Sergeant White, who was exhausted, asked me to carry his gun as well. I waded through the stream, managing both his gun and my own, along with 2 canteens. I was the first one to cross safely and get at the other side first. As I climbed the hill, I stumbled upon the body of an Indian lying on his back. In one hand he held a carbine, and in the other a whip. I checked his head and saw he'd been scalped, which led me to believe he was one of the Crow Scouts who had joined us earlier. None of our men had time to scalp a Sioux during their hasty retreat up the bluffs. When I reached the top of the bluffs, I met Captain French, who was both astonished and pleased to see me. They had conducted a roll call upon reaching the bluff, marking anyone not present as dead or missing. "Friedrich, it's good to see you," remarked Captain French as he shook my hand. "You were listed as dead, and here you are, alive. You're wet from crossing the river. Go see the sergeant, get a blanket, and sit by the campfire." I found my troop, grabbed a blanket and some food, dried my clothes as best I could, and got myself sorted out. The men knew nothing of Custer's fate, but they'd heard the sounds of heavy firing after reaching the bluffs. I was placed on the firing line. Using my butcher knife, I dug a small hole behind a sagebrush and took cover there. The bush was barely 2 feet high, and I was the tallest man in the troop, but somehow that little bush felt like protection. We were attacked numerous times that night and the next morning, but we managed to fend them off and even charged at them, driving them back down the bank with a cheer. Around noon on the second day, we spotted a group moving up the river valley. At first, we thought it was another band of Indians, but as they drew closer, we saw they marched in formation like soldiers. The yell, "It's Terry," was soon heard. "Terry is here." The few remaining Indians soon retreated, and soon we were joined on the bluffs by General Terry and his men. He advanced, and Reno's remaining men formed a circle around him and his staff, giving them 3 hearty cheers. The gray-haired general removed his hat and wept openly like a child. Well, that put an end to the fighting, and before long, we were getting acquainted with the relief party. And there was one more thing. After we left the battlefield and set up camp, I spotted my horse out on the prairie and went to fetch him. When I had dismounted in the woods on the first day of the battle, he was exactly as I had left him. The saddle pockets were still stuffed full of ammo, and my shirt was still slung across the saddle. It was clear the Indians hadn't laid hands on him. I must have been quite relieved to see him.